Good morning, everyone, and just say welcome again, and thank you for hanging in, those who are hanging in with us live with all the technical difficulties and everything that we've been having this morning. It was kind of weird as we started off just fine, no problems, and all of a sudden everything kind of quit and shut down, and we found a faulty piece of equipment that apparently the piece splits our video feed and our audio feed so it can go a couple different places, and that piece of equipment seemed to fail. So we bypassed it. So we had a solution. God helped us through that, and want to say thank you to our technical person that's here, also our technical person that's advising online and everything else, and both of them will remain nameless for right now, but want both of them to know how much I do appreciate them and what they do and how they help and how this wouldn't be possible without them. So we thank you for that. And they have to deal with all these kind of issues and things, so just thank you them for that as well too. Just want to say, those of you who did check in online, as I said, sorry we didn't put today's date in. Just simply put other August 1st, and then it's all there. You know, we're talking about the Beatitudes, and we're talking about Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 to 12 is basically what we're going to be going through, and part of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Beatitudes are all about, each one starts with blessed is somebody. And we said that, hey, a good way to think about that is being blessed is about being happy, and that God wants us to be happy. God wants us to be happy in our lives. Jesus said He came that we may have life and have it to the full. And I don't know about you, but I want a full life. I want an abundant life. And in my mind, being blessed or being happy is all a part of that. So it's something I want. It's something that Jesus said, I know everybody wants. Let me tell you how to get that way. Let me tell you how to live a blessed life. And so we've gone through several of those things. And let's just kind of go back and read through the Beatitudes real quick, just as a reminder. We haven't done this since the first week, and we're now in week 8. And so let's just go back and read through them and see how we can have a happy life or a blessed life. And then we'll talk specifically about the one we're going to talk about today. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And this is the one we're going to focus on today. Verse 9, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they be called the sons of God. And then, for some reason I don't have verse 11, 12 up, 10, 11, 12 up there, but we'll get to that later. But blessed, happy are people. Blessed, happy are people. So we're going to look at this one, Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now, a couple of things about this, a couple of things that are interesting about this is that the first part of this is a lot harder than the second part, okay? And some of you are like, but for they will see God, what does that really mean that they will see God? Well, not only am I glad you asked that because I highlighted it, but let's just talk about it a little bit, okay? When we want to, for they will see God, when it talks about this, simply is this. In my own words, it means that you'll experience God personally. Okay? You'll be able to know Him as a friend. You'll be able to hear Him. We talk about hearing God, knowing the will of God. You'll be able to hear Him, to know God, to see God better. Number of different things that other people have said. Craig Bloomberg wrote this. He said about this, he said, being the pure in heart, will see and experience intimate fellowship with Him, that being God. And he wrote that in its New American Commentary. Okay? So that intimate experience, to be able to fellowship with God, to have intimacy with God, to be closer to God, to be nearer to God, to better feel God, if you want to even think of it that way. That's what it means to be close to God. Rick Warren says this. He says, this people says that people whose hearts are pure, they're the ones who get close to God. They get to experience the presence of God. They get to feel the power of God. They get to know the purpose of God for their life. They get to live in the peace of God. They experience the pardon of God. And then when we're close to God, these are the people that God calls friends. Okay? So, what about you? What is it to see God? Are you, a person who can say, I see God regularly? Or are you a person that says, man, I really struggle to see God? Okay? My boys are 7 and 9 years old, and they're good kids. God has blessed me with that, and I'm thankful to God about it. It's not because of their dad, and it's not because of their mom. They're just good kids, and they're good natures, and they ask some good questions. And lately, some of the questions have been about how can we hear God? How can we know what God's will is? And how can we understand God? And those are very, very good seeking questions, and they're questions that they ask out loud, but many of us may ask, in our minds or in our hearts. As you hear this, when I say, you can see God, you may be thinking, how can I do it? What does that really mean? Well, I like this, and I forgot what pastor uses. I looked at a number of different sermons, and I found this, and I thought this was good. I think this is Charles Swindoll, if I remember right. This is, what is it to see God? He says it means to be admitted into His presence. Okay? You want to go see a doctor. What does that mean? Well, you get admitted into presence. You get to go in and into the doctor's office. You get to sit down. You get to talk with him, to tell him what's going on. He said also is to be awestruck by His glory. Okay? Now, we're not really awestruck with our doctor's glory, but you have maybe met people in the past that you were awestruck with who they were. And I've told you this story before, but when I was just out of high school, I walked into church one day, and I was a little bit late, but there was another guy coming in at the same time and I was just kind of awestruck by him because I knew him as being a former NBA player, a former famous NBA player. And I was just awestruck by him. Now, I can't say I was awestruck by his glory, but it was just something special about that. So when we get to see God, when we're in the presence of God, there's something special about it. And I know throughout my day and throughout my week and throughout my life, there have been times where, man, I've been just so awestruck by the presence of God. I've seen Him so clearly. I've understood Him so clearly. And then the last thing is to be comforted by His grace, be comforted by His love, His forgiveness of us, His wanting the best in our life. And sometimes when we need to see God, that's what we need to experience. That's what we need to see. So there's three things: to be admitted, to be awestruck, and to be confronted by God is what it is to see Him and what it is to be part of that. And Jesus says, you can have this. Not just once in a while. You can have this every day. Blessed is he who has a pure heart, for he will see God. Experiencing God intimately, clearly, and profoundly in life-changing ways. That's for me what it is to see and experience God. Matthew 5:8 again. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Okay? So the easy part, for they will see God. Now comes the hard part. Okay? What does it mean to have a pure heart? Well, let me share with you a story. And the story is a story about a man named Ruben Gonzalez. Ruben Gonzalez was a professional racquetball player. He's retired now. He played in the 70s and 80s, and I think part of the 90s, maybe even after that. I'm not sure when he retired. Okay? But Ruben Gonzalez, let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of him? I never heard of him until I read about him this week. And I read about him. I read this article about him. It says, most likely not. We have not heard of him. Okay? He's a player in the sport of professional racquetball, and it's even more or less likely that you're aware of his most outstanding move on the court. So of all his professional career, there was one time one thing happened, and people considered that his best moment. He won tournaments. He was a good player. He did lots of other things, but they considered this his best moment. Okay? He was in the final match of his first professional racquetball tournament. Okay? His final match. And it was in 1985. Gonzalez surprised the racquetball world with his sportsmanship. In 1985, he was still looking for his first Pro Tour win, and he and Marty Hogan, the sports perennial champ and pit bull, were locked in a 5-game battle in Arlington, Virginia. It was tied 2-2, 2 games apiece. Hogan was serving up 10-8 in an 11-point final. When Gonzalez ended the furious rally with a forehand kill, the referee called the shot good. But Gonzalez regained the serve, momentum, and opportunity for a tremendous upset. But according to pro Jerry Hessler, what happened next astonished the crowd. Rubin overruled the ref and said that the ball touched the floor before hitting the wall on himself, handing the match to Hogan. No one could believe it. It was unheard of. Okay? Now, okay, well, I thought I had some pictures of him up here. Oh, here he is. It's in the wrong place. So, there's a picture here of him. This incident made such a big impact on the racquetball world that they put him on the front page of the Racquetball magazine. And this is his first professional tournament. He loses the tournament because of that. And when reporters asked him, when they talked to him, here's what he said. Well, he said, nobody can believe it. It was unheard of. It gave Rubin lasting respect from the other players and from the fans. And here's what his message was. His message was that winning was not as important as integrity or having pride in yourself. When he walked off the court, when he called the foul on himself that caused him to lose the match, everyone was stunned. Okay? The lead editorial searched and questioned for an explanation for the first ever occurrence on professional basketball racquetball court. Nobody did that before. Nobody would ever imagine doing it in a sport and endeavor. Okay? It just doesn't do it. So here's a player with everything officially in his favor, with victory in his grasp, who disqualifies himself at match point and loses. And when Gonzalez was asked about this, he says this. He says, it was the only thing I could do to maintain my integrity. It's the only thing I could do to maintain my integrity. He got what it means to be pure in heart. He understood what it means to be pure in heart. Let's look at a couple other things here about being a pure in heart. Okay? Don Flo is the owner and CEO of what's called Flo Automotive Companies, and he started with one dealership. Actually, his father had a dealership when at a young age, and I think he was around 30 years old. He took over that dealership. His father entrusted him with it, but that was not he just didn't jump into it automatically. He had a master's in business. He had another degree in a religious school. He was, top of the class, different things. But he started off working every single job in the dealership, and when he had worked all those jobs in the dealership, his father then said, "Hey, I'm going to give you this dealership. It's yours to take over. You run it the way you want to. You run it the way you need to." And they went from that one dealership to, I believe I read this week that there's over 60 dealerships and about 1,500 employees, 1,500 employees now in it. Okay, and so he's raised some, from a private business owner. He's raised some eyebrows. Some people are interested in him, want to know why it is that he does what he does. And he has a couple different things, okay? When he was asked about his car selling process, he says, we have a customer-centric selling process. We don't have the traditional run back and forth negotiating prices. So when you don't go in and they don't give you a really high price and you give a really low price and you start going back and forth and back and forth. He says we have built a pricing structure that is set. He says our prices are actually a little bit lower because we're able to manage our costs better with our internal process. You don't have to be a tough negotiator or more educated to get a better price. If you got a PhD or if you're a janitor, you'll pay the same price for the vehicle. So they set the price of the vehicle. You know what the price is. And it's either you take it or you walk away. So the question came, why did they set the price this way? And listen to what he says. He says, we did a study and found out that people who typically paid the least for cars were the people who were able to pay the most. Okay? Those least able to pay paid the most. And then he says, for me, it was wrong to take a biblical advantage of the least able. It's a clear violation of the biblical mandate in the book of Proverbs. He understands what it means to be pure in heart. To be impure in heart is not something that we just apply at certain times during the week, or we just apply at certain places during the week, or we apply in certain areas. It's something that is lived throughout our life. So what does being pure in heart mean? Well, there are a few things. I want to share with you a few things. Okay? Another commentary says this. It says it denotes one who loves God with all his heart, with undivided loyalty. Okay? Deuteronomy 6:5, love the God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. You say, hey, if you're pure in heart, that's the way you love God. Okay? Purity and cleanliness were actually a very important part of the religious theme during Jesus' day. And when they observed the Old Testament laws, they looked at those, they observed those laws, they said, hey, these are going to make us clean. But here was the problem. They made you clean on the outside, but they bypassed the most important thing to be clean in. They bypassed your heart, your soul. To be pure in heart means that we're clean from the inside. I like what Michael Wilkins said. He said, Jesus declares that the pure in heart is what produces external purity, not vice versa. So if you're pure in heart, you'll be pure on the outside. If you're pure on the outside, doesn't necessarily mean you're pure on the inside. In this Beatitude, Jesus continues an important Old Testament theme, which is to be pure in heart describes a person whose single-minded loyalty to God affects every area of his life. He who loves a pure heart and whose speech is gracious will have a king for his friend, says Proverbs 22:11. If you have pureness of heart, people will be drawn to you. People will like you. Okay? Now, I like that. A pure heart describes a person whose single-minded loyalty toward God affects every area of their life. The Bible uses a couple different synonyms as for pure in heart, okay? If you go through the Bible, and if you want to search an English Bible, you can look for a couple different things. Look for the word blameless, or look for the word integrity, because those are often, what's translated pure in heart is often translated blameless or integrity as well. Okay? So he's saying that those that he will bless will be people that have integrity. That's what we're going to talk about today. What does it mean to have integrity? Okay? And as I mentioned, Richard Gonzalez, he understood what integrity was, okay? And I'm not going to read you that story again. But I'll just remind you what he said. His message of winning was not as important as integrity and having pride in life. And then what he said in the end, he said, it was the only thing I could do to maintain my integrity. He knew that he had to be honest. He had to be truthful. He had to be forthright. He had to do the right thing in order to maintain his integrity. And God says, have integrity and you will see me. Rick Warren says this: the Bible said that Noah had integrity. The Bible says Abraham had integrity. The Bible says that David had integrity, that Moses had integrity, Paul had integrity. Yet none of these guys was perfect. So I want you to hear this, and I'm going to say this again later. Integrity does not mean you're perfect. Okay? Integrity doesn't mean you never make a mistake. So what does integrity mean? Well, Rick Warren mentioned David, so let's consider David. Okay? David was called a man after God's own heart. Okay, 1 Samuel 13:14. And if you remember the passage and if you remember the story, Saul was king of Israel. Saul started off as a good king, but toward the end he did some kind of weird things. And one of the things that he did was he was supposed to wait for Samuel to come and to offer the sacrifices to God before he went into battle. And he got a little bit impatient and he went ahead and did it himself. And therefore he sinned against God. And here's what happened. When Samuel came, he says, now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him in leaders as people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. God doesn't look what's on the outside. He doesn't care about our image. Okay? He doesn't care what you look like outside. What he cares about what's on the inside. Saul went and offered the sacrifices, probably not to appease God, but more to appease the soldiers, more to appease the people around him. And God says that's not why the sacrifices should be offered. He didn't follow God's command to wait for Samuel. He did this on his own. His heart wasn't there. So Samuel told him, God says, I'm going to find somebody who has a heart like mine. Look at Psalms chapter 78, 72. David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands he led them. That person is, in 1 Samuel 13 that we were looking at, that person is David. And if you know the story about God sent Samuel out to anoint a new king, and he sent him to the house of Jesse, and he went to the house of Jesse, and Jesse had seven sons, I believe it was. And Jesse brought out, Samuel said, this is why I'm here. God has sent me here because the next king of Israel is going to be one of your sons, Jesse. So Jesse brings out his sons, the oldest sons. The strong, the good-looking, the healthy, all those sons, he brings them out. And Samuel looks at the first one and says, whoa, man, look at this guy. He's a brute of a man. He's good-looking. He's smart. I mean, he's got experience. He's got everything you could want. He will be the next king of Israel. And God says, hang on a minute. He says, I don't look on outside appearance. I look what's inside. And Samuel went through all of Jesse's sons, and God said, none of these. And Samuel asked Jesse, well, Jesse, do you have any more sons? Oh, yeah, I got David. David's out, he's the youngest of them. He's the smallest, he's the youngest, he's out tending the sheep. Samuel said, bring him in. And God said, this is the one I want. David ended up becoming king of Israel. He shepherded them with integrity of heart. He had integrity, but yet this is the same David who, as king, committed adultery. Remember the whole Bathsheba story? Okay? And not only did he commit adultery, but he used deception. He brought her husband in from war and tried to get him to be home so that he would think that she was pregnant with his child. He used deception. He eventually used murder to cover up his sin. Right there, there's three big ones right there. Adultery, deception, and murder. But yet David is a man after God's own heart. He's a man of integrity. Okay? David did a lot of other things that are questionable. he pretended to be mentally ill. And in 1 Samuel chapter 21, he was on the run from Saul, because by this time Saul was angry at him, trying to kill him, because Saul knew that he was going to be the next king, and he was trying to prevent that because he wanted his son Jonathan to be king. And David ran to another country, and when he ran to the other country, he offered to serve the king in the other country. But the king's officials were a little bit leery of David. They were a little bit concerned about David. And so, they started saying things to the king. So what David did is he pretended to be insane in all their presence. Okay? He pretended to be a madman. And he did this. He said he acted like a madman. He was making marks on the doors of the gate, letting saliva run down his beard. He was playing the whole part. He was, again, using deception. He was acting crazy. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of integrity, does it? See, when we talk about integrity, when we talk about pureness of heart, it doesn't mean that you're sinless. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean you don't make any mistakes. If you have to be sinless to have integrity, only one person in this world has ever had integrity, and that was Jesus. The rest of us, we've all blown it. We've all ruined it. We've all lost it already. So if you don't need to be perfect, what does it mean to have integrity? Because if you have to be perfect, we can never have integrity. But God says, have a pure heart, have integrity, and you'll be able to see me. Okay? So, here's what I think it means. It means several things. We're going to go through some things. I'm actually going to give you a breakdown a little bit later. But the first thing is, I think God is more interested in our attitude than our actions. Okay? Listen, let me say that again. He's more interested in why you do something rather than what you do. Okay? Look at 2 Chronicles 16:9. It says, "For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose heart are fully committed to Him." Okay? Think about that. God is searching for people with integrity. He's searching for people with pure hearts. And He's looking to them and He says, hey, I want to strengthen you. I want to help you. I'm not looking for people who are doing all the right things. I'm looking for people who are doing all the right things for the right reasons. Okay? Charles Swindoll says this, about this verse. He says, what is God looking for? He's looking for men and women whose hearts are His completely. That means there are no locked closets, nothing been swept under the rug. That means that when you do wrong, you admit it and you come to terms with it. When you long to please God in your actions, you care deeply about the motivations behind your actions. God is not looking for a magnificent specimens of humanity. He's looking for deeply spiritual, generally humble, honest to the core servants who have integrity. See, He's looking to the heart. Listen to some of the, he goes on and says this, he says, listen to some of the synonyms for this Hebrew word translated integrity. Complete, whole, innocent, having the simplicity of life, wholesome, sound, impaired. It is what you are when nobody is looking. Billy Graham was once famous, said that you can tell a true Christian by the way he acts at home. Okay? Swindoll goes on and says, we live in a world that says, in many ways, if it just makes a good impression, that's all that matters. But you'll never be a man or woman of God if that's your philosophy. You can't fake it with the Almighty. He's not impressed with things externals. He always focuses on the inward qualities, like the character of the heart. Those things that take time and discipline to cultivate. So, 3 words I think can be used to define what it means to be a man or a woman of integrity, to be a man or woman with pureness of heart. Integrity. The first word is whole. Okay? And that actually comes almost directly from the word integrity, from the root meaning of the word. Latin, it's when we talk about integrity, it's experience of feeling whole, being whole in honesty and truth and virtue, being whole and true to oneself. Okay? It's a pretty powerful experience when you feel that, when you have that. Okay? Now, the word integrity comes from the word integer. Integer, as you know, if you're a mathematician, is a whole number, okay? There's no parts of it, it's just a whole numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, okay? It's a whole number. It's not a decimal. It is a whole number. So we get this word integrity from integer, from being whole, okay? When you're whole, your life is whole, okay? Your life is the same at every point. Okay, it's not different at different points. I don't know why I thought about this, but I thought about this about when I was a child, and I could actually, I have these strange memories. I remember specific things at specific times, and I could remember this. I can remember sitting at my grandma's table in Kentucky, in the country in Kentucky. Okay, and we're at the table. We just ate a meal, and I told my mom I was full. And now I don't remember why I told her I was full. Maybe she wanted me to eat more vegetables or something like that, and I was like, no, I was full. But then the desserts came out. My mom's chocolate pie, or my grandma's chocolate pie came out, or her cinnamon rolls came out. Actually, I remember it was chocolate pie came out. And when the chocolate pie came out, man, I was hungry again. I wanted a piece of pie. And I was asked, well, how is that possible? I thought you were full. And I said, well, my dessert part of my stomach is still empty. It needs something in it, okay? And I thought about this, and I thought about that sometimes we live our lives in the same manner of thinking. We live our lives in thinking that we can compartmentalize things, that we have this area here, and this area here, okay? My work is maybe different from my home. My home is maybe different from my church. My church is maybe different from when I'm out, playing sports, or when I'm out just, whatever else it is I'm doing, okay? And we tend to compartmentalize it in different ways. I remember one time when I was in high school, I was talking to my father, and my father, told me, he said, hey, there are some people that are Sunday Christians. And what he meant by that is that during the week, you may not know that they are Christians, but on Sunday morning, man, they're faithful, good churchgoers, holier than thou, everything else, doing all the right things and stuff like that. But their life was not whole. They did not live with integrity. They did not live with a pure heart all the week long. They try to compartmentalize something. Rick Warren says this: if you segment your life like that, you lack integrity, because the exact opposite of your life being a whole. Integrity is not the parts of the pie, but it's filling in the whole pie. It means you're exactly the same with everyone you talk to, no matter which part of your life you're dealing with. You don't change. You don't wear a mask. You don't pretend. So, we like iMommy pie, and some of you know what iMommy pie is. And sometimes they sell out of a truck. They have a storefront in Nehu, but they sell out of a truck different parts. And you go up there and you can buy a whole pie. And when you buy a whole pie, there's 8 slices, and you can get 8 different slices in that pie. And you're saying, that's not a picture of integrity. Well, the picture of integrity is buying a whole pie that's all the same thing. Our lives should be the same no matter where we are, no matter who we're with, no matter what time it is, no matter what circumstances are. They should be the same. The root of integrity is wholeness, meaning our actions and choices we put on are the same. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. The root of integrity is wholeness, meaning that our actions are not choices we put on or take off as it may seem convenient, but stem from the whole of our being. It comes from your core. What is your core like? Jesus pronounces being pure in heart right after saying, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are those who show mercy. See, we can take and look at all those things together. That's why we read through them at the beginning. We can look at these things and see how they all work together and help each other out. You can't have pureness of heart if you don't have mercy. You can't have pureness of heart if you're not hungering and thirsting for righteousness. You can't have pureness of heart if you're not spiritually meek. You need those other things as well. Purity of heart arises not from the perfection of our will, but rises from the reception of God's grace. And one of the commentaries said that, and I love that, because it's not something you do. It's not something we work hard at. It's something that God gives us through His love, through Christ. We're going to celebrate communion next week. That's what we're celebrating, that through Christ we can have purity of heart. Now, the Christian life is a life that is based on grace. But out of that grace, then we do our works. Not to earn something, but because of our love of God and His love for us. So, integrity means to be whole, to be complete, to do things like you would do everywhere, every time, no matter who you're with, whatever else. You're just the same. It comes from the core. To have integrity also means to be authentic. I like, again, what Rick Warren says. He says, you got to keep it real. It means that you're the real deal. You're not a fake. You're not a phony. You're not blowing people off with some scam. You're not faking it to make it. You're pretending. You're not copying anybody else. You're not trying to be someone you're not. You're exactly who you appear to be. If you have integrity, you act the same no matter where you are. You're authentic. And I know sometimes that we're afraid to be authentic. You know, I can remember before I came here, you know, I was applying for some positions around, and I was applying for some pastor jobs, and as I applied for pastor jobs, you know, there was a bit of me that wanted to kind of, you know, make myself look a little bit better than what I was. I wanted to sell myself a little bit more than maybe what I was, and I was like, that's not authentic. Doesn't have integrity in that, so I can't do that. So I am who I am. Now, I'm not perfect, but I just, you know, what you see here is what I hope you see during the week too. Okay? I am who I am, and like I said, I don't try to be perfect. William Barclay says this. He says that the word hypocrite occurs again and again in the English. Originally, the Greek word hypocritus meant one who answers, and then came specifically to be connected with the statement and answer in the dialogue of the stage. It's a regular Greek word for an actor. It then came to mean an actor in the worst sense of the term, a pretender, one who acts the part, one who wears a mask to cover his true feelings, one who puts on an external show while inwardly his thoughts and feelings were very different. It describes one who acts pretentiously, who is counterfeit, a man who assumes and speaks and acts under a feigned character. A hypocrite is someone who pretends to be something he or she is not. And you see, this is the opposite of what integrity is in our life. This is the opposite of being a pure heart. Integrity means you don't spend your time pretending to be something that you're not. So, integrity is being whole, it's being authentic. And then the last thing is that with integrity, I don't know how to say this any better, but we're motivated for the right reasons. Okay? Now, I don't know if I should share this story with you or not, but I'm going to share it to you. I worked on the church staff. Well, I've worked on several church staffs. This particular church staff is a senior pastor. I was missions and youth pastor at the church and did several other things at the church. But as I was there at the church and the ministry grew, the secretary was hired specifically to help me part-time and to help the office manager part-time. And so we came into one year, and I say 1 year, it was every year, that there's always people concerned over the budget and should we cut the budget down because next year the giving may not be as good as it is right now and different things like that. And this particular year, the discussions were a little bit deeper, a little bit more hard. And I was about to go back to the U.S. to go for my home visit for a month, and while these discussions were going on, and so I had a meeting with my senior pastor, and we started talking about this issue and talking about that there was some concerns that maybe we need to cut back on the staff expenses. In other words, on the personnel budget, on how much it was in the church budget, and I know statistics, I know everything else, and I know that healthy churches, that usually your personnel budget is anywhere from 45 to about 51 or 52%, somewhere in that range, okay? And ours was a little bit over that. It was about 53%, 54%. So in discussing it, and the part of the discussion was that the secretary that I have may be let go to save a little bit of money. That would save some money. That would drop us down below, or closer to 50%. And she didn't make very much. It didn't make that much difference. And so I actually, in my conversation with the pastor, he asked me, well, do I need her? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people that say, well, do I need her? Yes. Can I get along without her? Yes. Okay? But I also told him, I said, hey, I want her to be here. And I want her to be here so much, and I value her work so much, and it helps me so much that, look, I'm willing to reduce my salary in order to keep her here. So we had that meeting. I thought he understood everything. He did understand everything. I left town. He met with the personnel committee. They met during that time. They came up with solutions. They decided to let her go. They decided to terminate her position. And I questioned about it. I asked about it, wanted to know why. It was never shared that I was willing to take a pay cut myself in order to keep her. And the other thing about it was that the senior pastor did not want to get rid of her in order to save on the personnel budget. He wanted a raise. He wanted more money. He wanted more money for housing. He wanted more money for his salary because he had financial needs. There's not integrity there. There's not a pureness of heart there. What's your motivation? Is it greed? Is it popularity? Are you trying to impress people? Maybe it's revenge, to get even. See, when we have those type of motivations, we're not doing things for the right reasons. There comes a time when there may be right reasons. Discussion with this week with Glory Church, and we're talking about the finances of the church. As I mentioned to you before, the finances are down 40%. And if they continue this way for a while, there may have to be reductions here in staff and pay and different things. And if that happens, that's a good reason. But what's your motivation? What's the reason behind all your actions? What's the reasoning behind your desires? What's the reasoning behind your needs? I'm going to tell you one more story. And this is a guy named Ian Rosenberger. Ian Rosenberger is an American. He's a 23-year-old, or was at the time he was a 23-year-old American. He was on one of the reality TV shows. He was on the TV show Survivor. Here's the story. It was December 2005, and 23-year-old Ian Rosenberger, hung desperately to an ocean buoy off the coast of Palau in the western Pacific Ocean. He had been there for over 12 hours. To someone unfamiliar with the situation, Ian's condition might appear bleak, but Ian was actually not a castaway from a shipwreck. Instead, he was a contestant on the popular TV show Survivor, where the contestant compete for a grand prize of $1 million. Ian was one of the only 3 contestants left out of the original 20, and this was the last immunity challenge. If he won the challenge, he would be one of the final 2 contestants for the $1 million gold or grand prize. The challenge was simple but brutal test of endurance and perseverance. Each contestant would cling to the ocean buoy as it swayed, sometimes violently in the waves, and the ones that could hang on the longest would get a free pass to the final round. The other 2 contestants hanging onto the buoy were Katie Gallagher and Ian's best friend, Tom Westman. Katie dropped out after 5 hours, leaving just Ian and Tom. As the hours marched slowly on the challenge became increasingly difficult physically, but for Ian, the bigger challenge was psychological. Along with his thoughts, he began to consider how he played the game and how much the $1 million meant to him. Ian could see a clear path to victory in his mind. If he won the challenge, he would get to choose which of the other 2 contestants to eliminate. So even though Katie had fallen off already, if you win the challenge, you can eliminate one of the 3 finalists. He saw his friend Tom as a bigger threat. In fact, he felt if he won the challenge and eliminated Tom, he would have a clear path to victory. But Ian was an Eagle Scout, and as he clung to the buoy, he began to repeat the words of the Scout Law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal. Ian stopped himself and he said he knew that he had neither been playing. He knew he had been neither while playing the game. He had neither been trustworthy or loyal. He said, I've been backstabbing people and was planning on doing that to my best friend in the game, and I realized I would lose that friend if I continued to play in the game with the same way. Every time I pulled the money out of an ATM account with $1 million, it would bother me. He thought of the example he would be setting, especially for his young sister. The thought about scouting, the thought about people who would watch me win, they would not have been proud. He quit. Not just the challenge, but the game. He gave up and asked his friend Tom to eliminate him. Tom reluctantly agreed, and the chance to become an instant millionaire was all over for Ian. As Ian predicted, Tom went on to become the sole survivor and to win the $1 million. Thinking back on that statement, Ian said this, I realize it's not just winning the million, it's how you win it. That's what I learned in Scouts. It's not just about accomplishing something, it's how you accomplish it becomes important. I decided to bow out. That was because of the Scout Law and because of my sister. He doesn't say this, but he wanted to have integrity in his life, in his winning. Living according to the values he learned in scouting was worth more than $1 million. Does he have any regrets about it? Well, he says this, I can't say the cash wouldn't come in handy right now, but I'm completely happy with the decision I made. I don't regret it at all. It's only $1 million. I left with pride and a story I could be proud of. Although if I stayed, I wouldn't be eating ramen noodles every day as I am now. You know, he got it. He got it about what it is to have integrity. Now, he learned that from Scouts, he learned that from other things, but God says we should have a pure heart. We should have integrity. It means that we do the things for the right reason. Integrity is what we do when no one is watching. It means we're consistent in how we act and react, how you think and how you wish, how you hope and how you pray. When you have the right reasons, you're sincere. When you have the right reasons, you put relationships ahead of all else. Your relationship with God and your relationships with others as well. I want us to finish here quickly with a quick look at Psalms 15. And we're going to look at Psalms 15, and then next week we're going to continue on with this particular beatitude, because we have some more to say about it. In Psalm 15, Psalms 15 gives us some characteristics of integrity. In fact, David gives us 8 characteristics of what it means to walk or live with integrity. David wrote this: the man who seeks God after his heart, the man who led people with integrity. So he starts off. He says, Lord, who may dwell in your sanctuary? Who may live in your holy hill? In other words, Lord, who can see you? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Lord, who can see you? So here's the answer. Here's the 8 things he gives. First one, he whose walk is blameless and does what is righteous. In other words, those who have integrity, those who have a pure heart. Remember I told you blameless is often translated as integrity, as being a pure heart. So he's saying those who are there's another English translation called the God's Word translation that says this: the one who walks with integrity does what is righteous and speaks truth from within his heart. Those with integrity. Okay? So, number 1, he speaks from the heart, is what the next thing is. Those are integrity. He speaks truth from his heart. He doesn't lie. If you have integrity, if you're not blameless, you don't lie, you don't fib, you don't stretch the truth, you don't deceive people. You speak the truth when you have integrity. Second thing, there's no slander on his tongue. Okay? Now, this one is something that maybe we like to not really think about. But what this means is, hey, if you put somebody down, look at them. He's too fat. He's too ugly. That's slander. If you talk about they're not smart enough, they're not, this or that, that's slander. Anybody you put down, or if you put down anybody, if you said anything negative about anybody, if you've said anything bad about anybody, you've lost your integrity. Okay? Whether it's about politics, their religion, lifestyle, cultural differences, any other difference, you've lost your integrity. He has no slander on his tongue. Okay? Now, and let's go back to that. No slander on his tongue. This also includes gossip. Okay? Now, you may be going, well, wait a minute. I don't give the gossip. I just hear the gossip. Okay? Well, if you're in the U.S. and you receive stolen goods and you know that those goods are stolen, you're just as responsible as the person who stole them. And God says, hey, you can look through other parts of Scripture and you can find it. Don't be a gossip and don't listen to gossips. Okay? Don't listen to slander that comes from other people. Who does no wrong to his neighbor. Okay? So, I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't know if I really need to say much about that. Okay? You treat your neighbors with respect. You do good things for them. You help them. You don't do any wrong. Okay? Look at the last one. Cast no slur on his fellow man. Again, it's kind of like the slander, but you don't wish anything bad on anybody. Okay? Well, God, this person treated me really bad. I just hope that you take him out of this world. Well, we don't do that. If we do that, we've lost integrity of heart, because God says, I love everyone. My heart is that everyone will come to know me. My heart, everyone will come to serve me. My heart is everyone will have a relationship with me and have a full and abundant life. So anytime you wish ill will on somebody else, you've slurred your fellow man. You've lost integrity. Going on, verse 4. Okay? He despises a vile man. So you stand up against evil. Okay? You see something bad going on, you take a stand for it. If you have integrity, if you have the heart of God, if you have a pure heart, you'll stand up for it. You You won't let that happen. You'll defend the defenseless. You'll help the widows. You'll help the orphans. You'll stand up against evil wherever it is. You honor those who fear the Lord. Okay? You honor those who fear the Lord. And again, I don't think I need to say much about this. And in fact, in my notes, I just didn't even write much about any of this because I think they're so clear, they're so straightforward. You honor those who fear the Lord means that you give respect to them. You encourage them. You build them up. Okay? And then this next one. This one can hurt a lot. You keep your oath even when it hurts. Keep it oath even when it hurts. There's another story, and I'm not going to read you the story, but I'll just tell you what happened. It's a story about two businessmen, and they made a business deal, and actually the business deal was over about $50 million. One man owned the company. He was going to sell part of the company to another man in his company. They met about it. They talked about it. They shook hands about it. And they went their ways. And then the lawyers got involved. And by the time all the paperwork was done and everything was settled, months had passed by. And it was actually a long time, almost a year's time. And what happened was that during that time, the man A's business, the man who was selling the business, his business just all of a sudden took off. The prices of the raw materials went down. The prices of what they were selling went up. And so that piece of the business that he was selling, when he sold it at $50 million several months earlier over a handshake, was now worth $240 million US. It had gone from $50 million US to $240 million US. Businessman number 2 said, hey, my company can't afford $240 million, but how about we meet you halfway? And he was hoping that maybe businessman A would say, okay. Because you see, nothing had been settled legally. No contracts had been signed. None of the paperwork had been signed. It was only a handshake agreement in an office with no witnesses several months before. Businessman A told businessman B, no. He didn't say, I want $240 million for it. He said, I gave my word. I gave my word that I would sell this to you for $50 million. I'm going to sell it to you for $50 million. It hurt him financially. Well, he still got $50 million. But from $50 million to $240 million, it hurt a lot. The racquetball player we read about earlier, it cost him his first major championship. Well, he still made another one. We don't know, but it cost him. You see, we keep an oath. It costs us even when it hurts. This week I went to a store and I went to go buy something, and I bought something for our family to use. I bought some electronics for our family to use, and it was not, I'll probably be the primary user of it. But part of my motivation in buying it was for the boys. And I got to talking with the sales clerk about different things, and he wanted to know, what it was going to be used for and everything else. And so I told him all the things it'd be used for. And he said, really? He said, how old are the boys? And I told him, well, they're 7 and 9. He said, oh. He said, and you still want to buy this? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I promised them that I would get something that would help us to be able to do the thing I told him about. And he surprised me. And he surprised me and said, oh. He says, that's admirable. He said, you're a really good dad because you made a promise to them that you would do something for them and you're doing it. I was like, yeah. Now, I didn't promise them I would buy that particular thing. But I did promise them I would do something to help in those lines. And he liked that a lot. It costs a little bit of money, sure. Okay? There was something else that I kind of wanted myself, and I decided not to get that, to get this for them. It cost me a little bit. It didn't hurt. I can't tell you it hurt. But when we keep our word, we have integrity. And sometimes it hurts. There are stories out there about business people who have done things. There's a story about a tennis player that back in the early 2000s that, again, he was in a match against a player that was way under him. And in the match, the player had break point, had actually game set match point. And he hit a shot, and the shot was actually good, but the linesman called it out. And the world's number one ranked tennis player, I think he was number one ranked tennis player at that time, told the referee that no, actually the ball was in. And he lost the match because of it. In the commentary, when I read the article, the commentary said about it, because of that, he lost tens and thousands of dollars in prize money. He lost tens and thousands of dollars in money as far as sponsors and things like that. So it cost him a lot, but he lived with integrity. He did the right thing. Proverbs 15:5. He lends money without usury. And simply what this means is that if you have integrity, you're a generous person. Generosity is usually a sign of integrity, okay? He does not accept a bribe against the innocent. He always does what is right. He's not swayed by money, bribes, anything else. He does the right thing. There's another story, and I'm not going to tell you next week a lot of stories, but it's got a lot of stories. I read a lot of stories this week about this. And I love this story, and I wasn't going to use it, but I'm going to tell you because I'm going way over it anyway. So let me tell you this story. Here's what happened. It was a basketball game, high school basketball game. And there were two crosstown rivals. The basketball game was going on. It was a close game. It was down to the final seconds. Team A was ahead by 1 point. They had the ball with just a few seconds left. They passed the ball in. Team B stole the ball, ran down the court, took a shot. The shot missed, bounced around the rim a little bit, and then came off the rim, and then they tipped it back in, and it went in. It was so loud, and there was so much going on that the referees could not hear the buzzer for the end of the game. So they didn't know if there was time left or not when the tip-in happened. They knew when the original shot happened, there was time on the clock, because one referee glanced up, but he didn't glance up at the time of the tip-in. So it was literally that much time, maybe a half a second time, maybe 1 second time, but it was just so loud they didn't know. Neither referee in the game knew what to do. So they went over to the scorer's table, to the official timekeeper, and they asked the official timekeeper, "Do you know if that last shot was good or not?" And the official timekeepers told the referee, said, "Hey, actually, the buzzer went off after the shot was made, but before it came off the rim, and so the tip-in did not count. It was after time had expired." So Team A lost to Team B. So the referee said, it was still, it was just so loud, it was so excited, everybody was, still going on, but everybody knew everything was in question, so he had to go tell the two coaches. So he went to Team B, told that coach, went over to Team A, told that coach. He said when he went up to Team A and told that coach, said that actually the timekeeper was with him as he told the coaches so that they would, that they could verify that with him. And he said that he told Coach A, he said, "Coach A, I'm sorry to tell you the tip-in was after the time was up and your team lost." He said Coach A was dejected, said his shoulders went down. He said he was, excited because he thought they'd won. Now he was dejected. He was saddened. And he said before he could say anything else, he said the timekeeper spoke up and said, "Dad, I'm sorry. The time was up. I had to tell the truth." The referee said his dad looked up. He said he had more joy on his face. He was proud of his son, and he looked at his son and said, "Son, you did the right thing." See, his son wasn't swayed by the circumstances around him. His son wasn't swayed by the possible outcomes. His son had integrity. He did what is right. And he said, the referee said he watched as the father put his arm around his son, gave him a hug, and they walked out proudly, excited about things. Look at the last part of that. He who does these things will never be shaken. And we're going to investigate that a little bit next week as we talk about this and we talk about integrity. Okay? Charles Stanley says this: integrity is the consuming desire to acknowledge and obey the Father in conjunction with readiness to confess sin and repent of sin. It testifies to our private and public behavior. Integrity leaves no ground for accusation. To be pure in heart means to have integrity. It doesn't mean to be perfect, but it means we own up for our mistakes. We confess them, we repent of them to God, to others, people around us, whatever we need to do. We try our best. We try to live with the heart of God. Now next week, we're going to look at some of the benefits of living with integrity. Some of the benefits of living with a pure heart. Because there's a lot more benefits than just being able to see God. That's the ultimate benefit. That's the best benefit. But there's some other things that can be beneficial in our life. And we're also going to look at some ways that we can grow in our integrity. Some practical things we can do. Some different situations. We'll look at different situations and say, this is what you can do to have more integrity in your life. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God. Be a motivational story. I would love it if one of you sometime in the future would say, hey, do you remember that message you preached about being pure in heart? Well, here's how God used it in my life, and here's how I was challenged to do it, and here's how I stood up to the test. So that next time I don't have to read about Ramon Rodriguez, whatever his name was, I forgot it, Gonzalez, or Ian, whatever his name was, or the owner of the car dealerships, so that I can tell your story, so that I can tell my story. Integrity, pureness of heart, that will bring us peace, that will bring us joy, that will bring us closer in our relationship with God. Let's go to God in prayer. Father, I thank